and that is rapid deployment of a custom look and feel intranet. And that's going to be presented by Vlad Katrinescu, product evangelist at Valo. So thanks for joining us, and handing it over to you now, Vlad.
Awesome, Ted. Thank you very much. I'll just wait a few seconds. There we go. I got the presenter role. Let me share and let me know once you see my screen.
It's looking good.
Awesome. Thank you. I know sometimes I get really too excited and I start talking too fast, and 2 minutes later, everybody tells me, Vlad, we don't even see your screen yet. Okay, so I will try to make this lightning fast, as Ted said. But really, let me introduce myself really quick. My name is Vlad Katrinescu, Microsoft MVP, working at Valo Intranet that my colleague Juha introduced earlier. So, not going to spend a lot of time on that, but instead, I'm really going to try and focus on tips that will apply to you whether you're on the Microsoft ecosystem or not, as I've seen Salesforce, Simpler, and a few other platforms out there. Uh, I always personally position the intranet as the front door to your digital workplace. We've really seen a switch from organizations only looking to adopt an intranet. And I mean, we have a Valo intranet in a way in the name of our company. That was really what people were looking for. And then in the past few years, there was a switch to the buzzword of everybody was looking for a digital workplace. Uh, but what we realized and what everybody finally realized is that the intranet is that front door. And we've seen a lot of tools come up through the years that were the intranet killers. I mean, if we look at enterprise social networks like Yammer, how many sessions I've attended at conferences where everybody said that Yammer will kill the intranet. We will not need intranets anymore in the organization. Everybody will go with an enterprise social network, and we don't need an intranet anymore. And that kind of died as people tried to implement it. They realized that you still need to have an authoritative information source such as an intranet. And we're kind of seeing the relaunch of that today with chat-based tools such as Microsoft Teams, Slack. If do you really need an intranet anymore if you have Teams, for example? But what we've seen as some organizations, especially smaller ones, have tried to implement this is that the intranet is still a key part of the communication strategy of each company. If you look at enterprise social networks, and personally have more experience with Yammer since I'm in the Microsoft ecosystem, so I'll talk to Yammer. But kind of applies to Facebook Workplace as well. It's really tough to make sure that your message gets along to everybody. You cannot do things such as targeting necessarily, and we've had other demos on targeting and why it's important in the amazing sessions today, or how to make sure that you push alerts to everybody while not being spammy. And the customer showcase we've seen earlier on how many alerts you have for you on the front page of the intranet. I really found that awesome. Whereas if you go on Teams, if you go on Yammer, all of the alerts you have from the 20 people that tagged you or that mentioned you, they all look the same. And this year's unfortunate events, I mean, with the crisis, that really outlined the need for an intranet on being able to actually communicate with people efficiently and being able to share critical company messages to everybody. But when it's time to update your intranet, most people are scared because everybody who has worked on an intranet project knows it's not a easy project. It's not something like deploying a new version of a tool and just it's done. And every time we start a new intranet project, we always say, this time we will do it faster than before. And you always end up almost 2 years later wondering what went wrong. An interesting stat that I found by Nielsen Norman. For those of you that never heard of Nielsen Norman, they have some great content out there. Some of it is free, some of it is behind a paywall. But every year they actually do a top 10 intranet report. And they actually share a bunch of key stats on what does it take to have an award-winning intranet, from the size of the team to how long it took to implement and everything. And if we look at an interesting statistic, from 2001 to 2007, winning teams required an average of 3.3 years to create their intranet. From 2008 to 2013, the average creation time was 3.6 years. 3.6 years is a lot of time to actually implement an intranet. However, beginning in 2014, companies started being more agile, realizing that, hey, we cannot actually spend 3 years to deploy a tool that we need today. And you actually see that average. And again, remember, this is not your average intranet. This is an award-winning intranet. And I know that we have organizations of all sizes in this call. So I just wanted to also show for the same years that almost all of the winning intranets are over 10,000 employees, going as far as 100,000. So we're not talking that the companies became smaller or stuff like that, but the overall time to create an award-winning intranet went from an average of 3.6 years to an average of 1.4 years. And if we look at last year, 2019, it actually went down to 1.2 years. So it's certainly going downwards, and the need to implement tools faster is even more important, given the events that happened this year that showed the urgency of having the required tools in place. But this kind of brings me to the question: 1.2 years is still a lot of time. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you should implement an intranet in a week. We all know that's unrealistic, even in a month. It's unrealistic for most organizations in this call. But still, as we start planning an intranet project, should we really take 1.2 years for users to see that first version? And this actually brings me to another question: as is an intranet ever finished? And in my opinion, at least, an intranet is an ongoing project. It's not something that you can work on for a year. Kind of, you get a project team, you get 10 people, you put them in a conference room that you call a war room. They do their workshops, they do the design, you hire in an army of developers to start coding all of those custom requirements, and then you launch it and forget it for 3 years. That was working before. When we had, and again, remember, I have a Microsoft background, so I'll use a Microsoft technology, but we had SharePoint on premises, right? We had SharePoint Server 2010 that came out. We would start creating our new intranet on SharePoint 2010, and then we knew, because of how our IT projects deprecation work, that we had to keep SharePoint 2010 for 5 years. So it created our project. We knew that our intranet was good for 5 years. We wouldn't touch it until it was time to migrate to SharePoint 2013 or SharePoint 2016. But now that most organizations are in the cloud, and I'm sure some of you in this call are still on premises and are maybe even looking at upgrading to SharePoint 2019 today, but this still applies to you. With the technology constantly advancing, we do not have that timeline of we need to update our intranet because we have a new version of SharePoint. Microsoft, Salesforce, Simpler, they keep pushing new features to the platform daily. We have new use cases that we need to answer to our users daily. They have new needs. that they need in the intranet. And we cannot tell our users anymore that, hey, you actually need to wait our next intranet project in 3 years before we can answer your needs. So an intranet project is never really finished. It's an ongoing task of how do we make sure that this tool still answers to the needs of our employees. So that brings me to the three tips that I have on how can we deploy an intranet faster. First tip I will have is don't start from scratch. I always say that every intranet is unique, yet every intranet is 80% the same. I mean, every every intranet will have a way to share news, to share events, to have a navigation, to showcase people. I think every intranet of a big company that I've seen has a stock ticker on the home page. They have the weather. Most of them have birthdays, lunch menu, and things like that. Why would you custom code all of this? Why would you start from zero, hire an army of developers, and rebuild the same features that thousands of other organizations have built before you? And there are many pre-built solutions out there that can give you 80% of the features you're looking for out of the box, and often 10% more with only configurations that you can do, not customizations. Also, something that we need to be aware of, I say that every intranet is 80% the same. The real thing is also that 20% that is different for each company, that's what will add the most value to your intranet as a digital workplace tool. So instead of hiring developers, and I'm not saying developers are not needed, but instead of hiring a bunch of devs to build 100% of the solution, get those devs focused on building the 20% that is not there in products that's specific to you, and that's what will add over 90% of the value for your tool, for your intranet as a tool in your digital workplace. There are many reports out there. Again, I'm coming from the Microsoft world. One great tool that you can use, and I remember seeing somebody in the VOP section that we had at the beginning that they spent years analyzing what tool would be the best for them. Uh, there are a few ways you can do it faster. One way that I recommend to everybody, there is actually a report by a company called Clearbox in the UK. And by the way, I have no affiliation with them or anything like that. I've met them in person. They're great guys, but I don't have any affiliation with them. But they have a report. I think it's like 800 pages now, and they really review in depth over 33 intranet in a box products available on top of SharePoint Online. Valo is of course included. I think our good friends are busy are also included in that report. But if you're looking at an intranet in a box on top of SharePoint, definitely something I would recommend. I saw some comments really quick appear on the side of my screen. I can't zoom on them now, but that
Yeah,
really.
let's encourage people to follow up with you in the innovation round when there'll be time for more discussion. We built that in there, so kind of think of people holding their questions till then.
Oh, I was not going to answer questions, said, but thank you very much. I was just going to say somebody said something really cool. An intranet is a journey, not a destination, and I love that. And it really fits well with the next point I was going to say that you do not need to have 100% of features in phase one. Take that phase one to for that quick delivery. Make sure your branding is there. Make sure you have all of your quick wins. What are the biggest pain points that people had in your previous intranet and solve them? And then use the next phases to actually evolve your intranet. I really love the. I see I only have 1 minute left. I really love the phased approach where you can have a rapid deployment and always innovate on top of it after. And finally, find your champions. We've always said find your champions. It has always been a big thing, finding our power users, finding our champions. But as you find, I think there's a modern breed of champions out there that are motivated by technology and not only want to make the company better, but they have a bunch of ideas from consumer technology to enterprise technology on how you can leverage technology to make your digital workplace better and achieve a better, in a way, a better work life and work life experience by using technology, and they will be the greatest idea generators that you have. So don't only look at department managers and things like that. Find those champions that are motivated by technology and how to make your company better. This is it for me. I think I finished on time. I hope, Ted, I respected that 1 minute mark. And we will also be around in the innovate sector with my good friend Sebastian, where we can talk more about where intranets are going.